Thank you for coming. I'm not going to say anything because we got a lot of folks that are going to share thoughts with you, but I did want to introduce to you our MC for tonight. You may have seen him on WCPO Channel 9 newscast. He is the anchor for the 5, 5:30, and 6, and also the 11 o'clock newscast. He is a 9-year veteran of our military armed forces. Has only been in this back with us in the city for a little over a year, but heroin has kind of been his focus in reporting. So with that, please welcome our MC for this evening, Craig McKee.
Thank you, Mike. I actually moderated an event similar to this at NKU, and I was overwhelmed by the number of people that came out and the perspective and the takeaway. And I really hope that tonight, through a number of speakers that we're going to have come up and talk about the current issue here in Hamilton County, that there is some sort of a takeaway for you. If I can, I ask the same question at NKU quickly. With a show of hands, first off, how many people have lost a loved one, son, daughter, husband, wife, because of heroin? All right, show of hands, how many people have lost someone they know? There's someone, whether it's an office member, friend of someone. So as you can see, if you look around, you see those hands. Heroin impacts so many people, and there's a stigma that I think that runs through, and when we get feedback on Facebook, through social media, and of course emails from a number of viewers, there's this kind of this thought that, well, heroin doesn't impact me because, you know, my son or daughter, they don't do heroin, or in order to do heroin, you must be homeless or you must be down and out. Well, heroin impacts every social, economic level in our community, and it's tearing this community apart on so many levels. And so hopefully tonight we can talk about what law enforcement is doing in our community to tackle this problem, to track down the folks responsible, and also talk about some of the resources and ways that, you know, if you happen to know someone dealing with addiction right now, that they can get the help that they most certainly need. All right, first up, we're actually going to introduce Sheriff Jim Neal and Anderson Township Trustee Josh Girth for a few remarks about this topic. Sure.
Welcome to Anderson Township. Anyhow, I raised my hand. I lost a nephew, and his spouse, my niece, is also an active addict. They were, but it's ugly, very ugly. It's destroying the fabric of our community. But anyhow, I just want to give you a little background of what brought me here today. Just about 2 years ago, the Attorney General's office met with me as the newly elected sheriff about putting together a heroin task force in Hamilton County like they have up in Lucas County. That's where Toledo is. They have a sheriff up there, John Tharp, who was the first sheriff, as they say, to bite the head off this poison snake and do something about it in Ohio in an organized fashion. Well, they wanted to bring that concept down here for us to do something similar. So subsequent to that, I started my billboard campaign, which I got the idea from Sheriff Jones. I stole that idea from him. He had a sign just like that up in Middletown, and he was honored that I plagiarized him because, you know, that's flattery for us in law enforcement. The wheel's already invented. But as you know, I've had them billboards up for a year and a half. I have a 2-year on those, you know, report heroin dealers. And then about that time, too, Chief, not too far from here, in fact, he's sitting up front here. You know that area down up north in Newtown, village of Anderson Township? But anyway, Tom Synan says, Sheriff, you and I and a lot of the other chiefs and law enforcement police officers are attending all these forums, and all we're doing is talking about what we need to be doing. And quite frankly, we're tired of the talk. Let's do something. So we got with the other police. Tom introduced the idea at a police chiefs meeting, because, you know, us police chiefs in Hamilton County get together once a month and talk about important stuff, just like this heroin epidemic. And we formed a committee. So every month that we met, the committee got together and reported on how we're coming with the task force. Well, guess what? We had a task. We put together a task force. And we started off with 8 law enforcement officers from different agencies, and I deputized them so that they have countywide jurisdiction so they can investigate these overdose deaths backwards, not only to track the supply, but to get these predators, these dealers that caused the death of the person that brought us to, got our attention. But anyhow, this task force was the first unit organized for what we call the Heroin Coalition. And Commissioner Greg Hartman helped to get other human service groups, your education piece, your prevention piece, your detox piece, your treatment, and your recovery, getting all these groups together to form a coalition, which is the county community resources to fight this epidemic. And then he moved on and he blessed Dennis Dieters with that responsibility now. But I just want you to know that it was law enforcement that said enough with the talk. Let's do something about it and try to make a difference. But we can't do it. And Tom will tell you when he gets up here to talk, we can't on our own do anything to make much of a difference. It needs a community effort. We can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. It's going to take all of us working together for the benefit of all of us. So that's where we're at with the coalition, and I'm going to tell you that the coalition in Hamilton County is going to be the national standard. We are the standard, and we're doing a fabulous job, but we need more resources across the board. And we have a lot of ideas, and this thing's it's taking off, it's growing. I'm not even Italian, and I talk with my hands. But anyway, God bless each and every one of you. This is a really good turnout. And I'm going to move off the stage because there's a lot of important people with a lot of powerful words and great messages. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Josh Girth. I am one of the Anderson Township trustees on behalf of myself, Andrew Pappas, D. Stone, Vicki Earhart, our administrator. Thank you guys for being here tonight. It does mean a lot to all of us here knowing that we have people in this community that care. I grew up in Anderson Township. I went to Turpin High School. Part of the reason why I'm on this stage is because I felt a need to serve the community that served me so well growing up. That is the great thing about Anderson Township. It is a great community. I went to high school with a guy named Adam Hamilton. Adam was, he was great. He was the life of the party. He was very outgoing. He just had an energy about him, and everybody always wanted to be around him. We had a great time in high school. Got out, went our separate ways. I would see him every now and again if he'd come back in town, and we, high school buddies would hang out. He just was great. He was in the Navy. Was a Navy vet. Great family. And yesterday I drove to Lexington, Kentucky, and attended Adam's funeral. Unbeknownst to me and several of my friends, Adam had been struggling with addiction for a number of years. And he had been in and out of the VA and their programs, came actually last Friday up to northern Kentucky to fly out the next morning to go to New York and be in a longer-term support program in New York. And that night when he got up here, he shot up, and that was his last time. I also went to high school with a girl named Erin Heaston. Erin also came from a great family, lived on Royal Green, was an athlete, beautiful. We had part of our group, a lot of fun in high school, like high school people do. And again, you get out of high school, you lose touch with some of your friends. We had our reunion a few years back, and Erin was not there. And Erin was not there because she was in jail. Erin had been struggling with a 5-year addiction. However, unlike Adam, I am happy to report that Aaron has beat it and is closing in on 2 years of sobriety. So because of that, I'd like you to recognize her. Aaron, could you stand up for everyone? Thank you for being here. We have a problem. We have a problem in Anderson Township. We have a problem in Mount Washington. We have a problem in Claremont County. We have a problem in Anderson Township, whether it's directly because of people using or indirectly because of the crimes or somebody you know or anything else associated with this terrible epidemic. And we have to do something about it. We have over $200 million of ongoing or pending investment in Anderson Township right now. Unprecedented amount of investment. But at some point, this is not only a human issue, it becomes a budget issue, it becomes an economic issue. Someone, sometime, at some point will say, you know, I've heard about Anderson, they got a lot of heroin. I've heard about Mount Washington. If anyone says Mount Washington, chances are, close after Mount Washington comes, well, you know, they got a lot of heroin. And there's an issue because we can't let that happen. We have to be proactive. I don't know what the answers are, but I do know it is my job, it is Andrew's job, it is Dee's job to make you aware and to be proactive on fighting it. Because we have a budget issue that we have to deal with, and our most important item in that budget is the safety and security of everybody in this room and the 43,000+ people in Anderson Township. We have no chance to waver on anything related to fire, EMS, and our sheriff department, who we contract with and have a wonderful relationship with. We have a problem, but we have to address it. I also chair the Much in Common Forum, which is a forum of regional leadership. All 178 jurisdictions around the tri-state area, we got together over the last 4 months to talk specifically about this problem. And as Tom Simon will tell you, the issue is sometimes elected leaders who are in a position to make change at the state level, at the county level, at our local level, and we need to be on board. As Sheriff Neal said, it does take a community. It takes law enforcement, it takes prevention, and it takes our elected leaders, and that is why I'm chairing that group. My co-chairs are the Covington Mayor, Sherry Caron, and Dearborn County, Indiana's Commissioner, Kevin Lynch. We will continue to have meetings about this to figure out what we can do regionally to help support the efforts made by the Hamilton County Coalition, Heroin Coalition, and everybody else. You're going to hear from a lot of people tonight. You're going to get a lot of information. You're probably going to have questions. You can follow up with me. You can follow up with them. We are very accessible. Thank you again for being here, everybody.
And in fact, to that point, after our speakers are done, we are going to have a short Q&A session. So if you do have any questions that pop up, you want to jot them down, or if you think you can remember them throughout, at the end we will have a moment for you to ask some questions. But everyone will be available for one-on-one moments as well. All right, I'd like to bring up Lieutenant Brad Winnall. As our first speaker tonight, has seen it all over his 40 years with the Sheriff's Office. He's been fighting drug traffickers for most of his career and now oversees the Sheriff's Office Regional Enforcement Narcotics Unit. Lieutenant Winnall will explain what the Regional Narcotics Unit does, how the heroin is coming into our community here, and how this epidemic compares to drugs that he's seen in the past. Please welcome Lieutenant Commander Brad Winnall.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to cover the law enforcement perspective, and I represent the Hamilton County Sheriff's Regional Narcotics Unit. The Regional Narcotics Unit is comprised of officers from the Sheriff's Office, the Cincinnati Police Department, the Cheviot Police Department, as well as deputies who are assigned to Renew from both Anderson Township and Sycamore Township. Renew, as it stands, has been investigating drug traffickers in Hamilton County for 43 years this year. Our mission is simple. It's to disrupt the local drug trafficking organizations and their sources of supply wherever they're located. Since 1999, the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office has assigned 2 full-time prosecutors to handle the prosecution of Renew defendants and, of course, provide us assistance during complex cases. During Renew's 40 years plus, the drug trafficking trends have continued to change. In the 1970s, heroin from Asia was available to a rather small drug-addicted community. During the 1980s, powdered cocaine emerged as the drug of choice. 10 years later, crack cocaine dominated the drug-addicted population. And although drugs such as methamphetamine, LSD, MDMA have developed a presence in this community, cocaine, both in powder and crack form, dominated the drug trade for years. Well, now we've come full circle, and our communities are saturated with traffickers selling heroin from Mexico, and it's more plentiful and cheaper than ever. Heroin seizures by Renew in Hamilton County started a steady increase in 2007. However, it was from 2011 to 2013 that the amount of heroin seized by Renew in Hamilton County rose 740%. In the last 2 years alone, Renew has seized over 52 pounds of heroin. The real change that we observed was how heroin impacted such a larger portion of our population, especially people in the suburbs. In the 70s, heroin was generally concentrated in the urban areas, but now it's clearly everywhere. Every community, suburb, rural area as well. During interviews with heroin addicts, a majority of those indicated that they got addicted to heroin because they'd previously been involved with prescription medication before they tried heroin. However, some addicts indicated that they were offered free heroin or simply tried heroin with a friend as the reason that they became addicted. Every day, we see people driving into Cincinnati from Indiana, Kentucky, Claremont County, Adams County, and they're there to do one thing: buy their daily dose of heroin. These people are spending between $10 and $150 a day on their heroin habit, and since most don't have the income to cover the expense, well, they do whatever they need to do to get the money to feed their habit. It's that need to find the money to feed the habit that affects all of us. Thefts, burglaries, car break-ins, robberies, shopliftings, prostitution, even recently where a woman or a mother had traded her daughter for heroin. Many of these crimes are committed to enable the heroin user simply to get enough money to fill a syringe with heroin. To give you some idea about the profits made from heroin, these are photos of sweet and low sugar substitutes contained about 1 gram of heroin. 1 gram of heroin on the streets of Cincinnati sells for about $150. An ounce of heroin, about this size, about 28 grams, will cost a drug dealer about $2,500. So if he sells it by the grams as is, he makes $1,700. But what they do is they cut it with either an inositol, mannitol, lactose, and they increase their profit depending upon how much they dilute the heroin with the cutting agents. And of course, sometimes it's cut with other drugs like cocaine and fentanyl, which has caused significant increases in overdose and deaths. So a dealer buys an ounce of heroin for $2,500, he cuts it once, now he's got 2 ounces. He then sells it for $150 a gram, potential profit about $5,900 from the original golf ball size of heroin that he just cut and sold. And often, the heroin is cut with additives by traffickers, I'll tell you from a personal experience, in the most unsanitary conditions that you can imagine. There's no regard for the addicted customers they're serving. The sole motivation? Money. In one case last year, in 48 hours, we seized $1.5 million in cash and $600,000 worth of vehicles and jewelry and 7 pounds of heroin from one organization bringing their heroin in from Chicago. Renew has developed a variety of initiatives over the last several years to deal with the heroin problem, including undercover investigators who work throughout Hamilton County identifying and arresting drug traffickers, an interdiction unit that works to intercept the drugs coming into the tri-state area, and the intelligence unit, which focuses primarily on identifying heroin drug organizations and their members and sources of supply throughout the United States. During one recent undercover initiative, we identified a heroin dealer that turned out to be quite an energetic businessman. He would text all of his customers and potential new customers on a Saturday night offering free heroin on Sunday mornings, and he called it Free Day. So early on Sunday morning, he'd then send out the text with the location, mostly in the city's west end, and then he'd put small packets of heroin out on the sidewalk or nearby steps and sit back and watch as the people from Kentucky and Indiana, Anderson Township, Miami Township, surrounding areas would drive downtown, park, walk down the street, sometimes with their children in their cars, pick up their free heroin and head back home. So this guy not only maintained his customer base, but in fact obtained new customers by handing out free heroin to people. And of course, what did he do? He developed return customers now addicted to heroin. He had the perfect business model. He sold a product that people, because of their addiction, had to have, and who would return sometimes daily to purchase additional heroin. By the way, this individual ended up shooting 2 people in Cincinnati, killed 1 man over a dispute about heroin, and was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Violence and heroin addiction and trafficking go together. Another undercover investigation we did involved a Mexican organization distributing heroin throughout southern Ohio. We subsequently arrested and interviewed 2 illegal Mexican aliens who told us their story. They were recruited in a small town in Mexico from signs posted in their store suggesting that they had work in the United States for anyone interested. These subjects were told by the Mexican cartel that the cartel would get them across the border and they'd be transported to either Columbus, Ohio or Cincinnati, Ohio if they would agree to deliver heroin for the organization. These cartel members also identified the families of these subjects before they left Mexico and threatened to kill their family members if the subjects ever got caught and cooperated with law enforcement. Once in Cincinnati, they'd be put in an apartment and provided a vehicle and trained in the delivery of balloons of heroin to customers in our communities. These individuals would then drive around the streets of Cincinnati with balloons of heroin in their mouths and make deliveries as instructed by other members of the organization. They were told, keep the balloons in your mouth if at all possible and have a large bottle of water with you at all times. And if you suspect that law enforcement is going to stop you, then grab your water and swallow all the balloons as quick as possible. I can't tell you how many occasions that we set up these individuals and arrested them either after selling balloons or en route to deliver balloons where the subjects have swallowed or attempted to swallow the balloons of heroin. In one case, we transported one of the individuals to University Hospital and waited several hours for the body to complete its medically induced waste elimination process. That's as nice as I can say that. Well, then we had to recover them, and we recovered 53 balloons of heroin from this one Mexican courier. Besides sending drug couriers into the United States, the Mexican cartels are also primarily responsible for getting heroin and other drugs into this country, across, where else? Our southern border. They then arrange the distribution throughout the United States using the same methods as all of the major businesses do to get their products to the consumer. Trucks, cars, planes, buses, parcel companies, the United States Post Office, pod companies, all of these means of transportation are utilized to get their product to the consumer. It just so happens Chicago, Illinois is one of the major source cities for heroin in Cincinnati. However, of course, we've identified other cities throughout the country, California, Georgia, Nevada, as well as Texas and Arizona, that also have organizations that distribute large quantities of heroin. A primary goal of Renew is to interdict these drugs before they reach the local traffickers and subsequently get distributed into greater Cincinnati. From a law enforcement perspective, we came up with initiatives that we developed an interdiction program for one where we use uniformed officers and their canines trained for narcotics detection on the highways. We also have interdiction agents working in all of the hotels, parcel companies, and bus stations. Sheriff Neal mentioned this earlier. Over the last 1.5 years that he's put up these billboards around Hamilton County. They contain the Renew email, text a tip line, and office number. I can only tell you that the response to the billboards has been dramatic. We get hundreds and hundreds of messages a week. Some of them are as little as a nickname of someone. Some of them are more complete. I would ask you if you know anyone or have any information about drug trafficking. Of course, the more information we get, the better. Suspects' names, addresses, phone numbers, license plates. All of those relevant pieces of information go to a puzzle so that successful drug investigations can be initiated from this reliable information we receive from not only citizens but confidential informants and other agencies. In over 42 years of investigating drug traffickers, Renew has arrested thousands of individuals. We've seized millions of dollars worth of drugs. But the bottom line is that as long as the Mexican cartels can find a way to get heroin and other drugs into our country across our borders, there will always be local drug traffickers willing to sell the drugs on the streets and make the easy money to our drug-addicted members of our community. The Hamilton County Sheriff's Regional Narcotics Unit is committed to doing all that we can to dismantle these organizations through vigorous drug law enforcement. During a question and answer session at the last heroin forum in Anderson Township, a man wanted to know what he could do to help because he didn't have any information on heroin dealers. I thought about that, and my answer would be that law enforcement's only one part of the solution. As a community, each of us can take the time to talk with our children, our nieces, our neighbors, our friends, and our neighbors about the dangers of heroin, because it's imperative if we hope to make any inroads against this epidemic that we need to educate people to prevent their initial use of heroin, and then get those people that are addicted and want help treatment. We have all seen how many heroin lives have been ruined by this heroin epidemic. Hopefully, we can begin to take back our communities one person at a time through education, awareness, and treatment. Thank you. Is that what you needed? I'll take all your notes as well as mine.
Let's see where we're at here.
There
we go. I think we're good there.
All
All right. It's interesting, some of the things that he actually pointed out, we've covered, of course, on the news. And there was one mother I spoke to who was using heroin in the car, 2 kids in the back seat, and she was busted. She went to a treatment facility and was treated and subsequently also relapsed. But to point out, she would receive those phone calls and those text messages from the dealer directly. As soon as a new shipment came in, he would say, "Heat's in." And she knew immediately that she could go down and get her next fix. And if she didn't have the money, he said, "Don't worry about it. Come on down, I'll give you some for free." And to see that play out and to see someone explain that firsthand, the first time I heard that, I was like, seriously? You can just go down and get this for free? And it's a different way, and hopefully we can talk about that a little bit later too. It's a different way of doing business. They've redesigned the way that they do business, and it's as easy as, you know, if you call Domino's Pizza and ordered a pizza, you can do the same thing with heroin, and it's scary and it's unacceptable. So hopefully we can continue trudging forward here. Let's talk to Joe Lucas right now. He's our next speaker. As a recovering addict, he can attest to the addictive nature of heroin and how destructive it certainly can be to families, friends, and life in general. He now works as a counselor mentoring current addicts, but as you're going to hear, he's actually come a long way where he was previously. Joe, please welcome.
Hi, my name is Joe. I'm a recovering alcoholic and heroin addict. I'm going to put these ounces of heroin away. I don't want to relapse. Excuse me, I've got this cough and cold. It's pretty bad, so I'm going to try to get through this. My voice is going out on me. I come up here and I tell my story because, we're talking about the problem of heroin addiction and how it's tearing up our communities and our neighborhoods. And, and I've been that addict. I've been that person that struggles every single day doing something that I didn't want to do. I never woke up and said, today I'm going to be a heroin addict. I'll be a junkie today. Never did I wake up and say, I want to cause harm to my family or I want to steal from my own mother. I never signed up to do this. It was never my intention, and it's a struggle every day to live that life and to do the things that you have to do to get that next shot of heroin. And I've lived that life for a long time. And now that I'm sober, I'm doing things on the other side. I'm trying to give back to the community that I helped to tear apart and destroy and cause so much chaos in. And I'm trying to help people that are like me, that don't know the way out, that are completely hopeless and powerless over this disease of addiction. What it is, it's a disease. So I'm always on board to do this and come talk. I started using drugs and alcohol at a very early age. I grew up in a nice home from the west side of Cincinnati. I grew up in Westwood. I went to an art school. I went to Shield on Short Vine. It's no longer there. It's a shame they tore that beautiful building down. But I played violin. I had some talent. I had some potential. I did very well in school. I went from Shield to performing arts and excelled at performing arts. And, if you ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to go to the Army, and I was just a typical kid in a good home. And, like most teenagers, I was around 12 years old, and I started to experiment. I went to a friend's house, and there was some alcohol there, and took a drink of alcohol and liked the way it made me feel. Liked it so much that, the next time I went over there, I said, hey, let's go back and get some of that booze out of your dad's liquor cabinet. And, I've read a lot of books and I've done a lot of classes on alcoholism and, the disease concept of alcoholism. And the more and more I learn about it and the more and more I teach about it, I think it's something that I just had. I was waiting to find out. And when I took that first drink of alcohol at a young age, it's like my life was in black and white, and then I got that booze in me, and it went into color, and everything was just awesome. I love the way it made me feel, and that's what makes me an alcoholic, is the way how I love the effects produced by alcohol. And that's how it started for me, was the alcohol, and I did that a lot. I drank a lot. I was introduced to opiate painkillers around 13 or 14 years old. It was a Vicodin. And my mother had a prescription for Vicodin in her medicine chest for a tennis elbow that she had. She's never played tennis, so I don't know about that. But it was an old bottle. She doesn't, she's not a drug addict. She's a nurse, actually. She works in labor and delivery and has worked in labor and delivery in Cincinnati for 40 years. She had this bottle of Vicodin in her medicine chest and, used a couple of them and then just left it, never touched it again. And I found out about it. I saw it one day and I knew what the label was, and I was starting to learn more and more about, different drugs and stuff from the friends that I was hanging out with. And I tried it and I loved it. It made me feel good. I got that warm, fuzzy feeling, and that's what I was after, that warm, fuzzy feeling. Quickly graduated to taking Percocets and the oxycodone, started using that. Really liked it. I continued to drink and smoke pot and stuff like that. But as that became a bigger part of my life, I stopped going to school. I started to be truant. I started to get in trouble with the law. I was out, they had started a curfew in Cincinnati, and you had to be in by midnight or something. I don't know when it was, because I never went in at midnight. You know, I was pretty much doing what I wanted to do. I had a group of friends that I started running with in the neighborhood, and we ride around on our BMX bikes. And, you know, they sold pot. They were older than me, and they were always in trouble. And we liked to chase girls and, you know, ride bikes and have a good time. And, you know, did what typical boys, teenagers did, you know, got in fist fights and, you know, had a good time. Went to festivals in the summertime. It was always a good thing in the west side of Cincinnati. The festivals are just awesome. And, you know, I had a good time with it. Never did I think that it was going to take hold the way it did. Never did I think that there were going to be consequences like I suffered. It was just a young teenager having fun. That's the thing about alcoholism and drug addiction. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And you cross that line into addiction, and the addict or alcoholic doesn't know they're crossing the line. It just happens, and then once it's too late, you know, there's a need for an intervention to make it stop, and that's what I needed. Like I said, I graduated into Percocets and oxycodones, and then one time I was at a friend's house in Cleves, Ohio, and he had a Oxycontin. I'd never heard of Oxycontin, and I tried a pill, and I absolutely loved it. It was expensive. It was $50 for an 80 milligram pill. They're like Percocets. It's the same chemical. It's oxycodone, but unlike Percocet, they don't have the Tylenol, the acetaminophen. It's just all narcotic, and 80 milligrams of it. And they showed me how to remove the time-release coating and break it down into a powdered form and snort it. And when you do that, you have a feeling just unbelievable high. And I loved it. That's right up my alley, what I was looking for. I wanted to feel high, and as high as I possibly could. I was already getting a tolerance, and my disease was already progressing. I didn't know it. When I found out about those Oxycontins, I started using them all the time. And the consequence started happening. You know, I couldn't show up to work. I was working as a heating and air guy, and I couldn't get to work on time. When I did go to work on time, I was slacking, and I was always preoccupied with getting drugs and alcohol, and, you know, when we're going to take a lunch break, when we're going to go downtown to the supply company that we bought our equipment from, our parts from, so I could make a quick little side trip to the downtown to get another pill. And as the progression built and the tolerance built, the more and more, you know, that I did. I started with one Oxycontin, and, you know, within 6 months, I was taking 5 to 6 of them a day. And that's expensive. When the drug becomes that expensive, I had to do things to get, I mean, I wasn't making $500–600 a day doing heating and air. I made good money, but it was nothing to support my habit. So I started stealing, you know. I grew up in a good home. We were, you know, West Side Catholic. They raised me with good values and morals. I was a Boy Scout, and I excelled in Boy Scouts. You know, I knew how to share. I knew how to tell the truth. I knew how to be honest and not steal. All those things I knew. But when I got addicted to the pills, you know, I lost touch of all that, and I did whatever I had to do. You know. The biggest stigma of drug addiction is that these are bad people, you know. These are our brothers and sisters and our sons and daughters. You know, these are our, you know, friends and family. They're not bad people. You know, they're sick. And I had to, you know, I had to figure out that I was sick. I thought I was a bad person. And there was a lot of shame and guilt to what I was doing. I didn't want to steal from my own mother, but I had to do that to continue to use. If you don't use, you know, you go through withdrawal, and withdrawal is horrific. It's a really awful experience, and that's why the addict keeps using, because they want to avoid the pain of withdrawal. So every day I'd wake up and I'd start to get sick, and it's like the flu times 10. I mean, unbelievable sickness, and the only thing you can think of is, how can I get another hit to take this away? So I will steal from my mother's purse to get $20 to go downtown and get some heroin. Like I said, the Percocet and the oxycodone, Oxycontin, I grew such a tolerance to them that, 5, 6 pills a day got to be a little much, and I couldn't steal that much. So I was downtown one day, and a guy that typically sold me Oxycontin, he didn't have any, and he said, well, I got this other stuff, and he called it dog. That's a nickname for heroin, dog food. So if you hear your kids talking about dog, they're not talking about the pet, they're talking about heroin. So he said, I got some dog, and he said, it's cheap, and it does exactly what you need it to do. And I said, all right. I had $20 in my pocket, and I got a $20 sack of heroin. I think it's like 0.2 of a gram. And I snorted it, and I got the feeling that those Percocets and those Oxycontins gave me. I got that euphoric feeling, that high that I was after. I wasn't going into withdrawal anymore, and I switched to heroin. The Oxys were just too expensive. And this was, I was 16, 17 years old. It wasn't like it is today. There was, fentanyl wasn't around back then. There was a lot of the powdered heroin, and there was a lot of the black tar heroin from Mexico. The balloons that they showed, that's how the tar comes. And that got really popular towards the end of my using. But just all the consequences, DUI after DUI after DUI, driving intoxicated. I remember driving and trying to hold one eye shut so that I could see the road coming back from downtown. I started living with my mom. She moved to Loveland, Ohio, and I would take the 75 northbound from downtown Cincinnati to Fields Erdel, Montgomery Road, with, so impaired that I had to hold an eye closed to see the road. And I was driving next to you, I didn't do that because I intentionally wanted to hurt you. I did that because I was powerless and I was out of control. It got really, really bad. Like I said, you can't wake up every day and do the things that an addict has to do to get the next hit without feeling some sort of remorse and guilt and shame. And I was feeling that every day. It was a constant state of depression and self-hatred. And I didn't have an answer. I didn't have a solution. I didn't know about treatment or detox. So it was like a merry-go-round, just vicious cycle of, taking and hurting and using and the things that I did. And it got so bad that I wanted to end my own life. And one day, after coming home and being extremely drunk and stealing my mom's car and going out to a friend's house and drinking and drugging all night, I came home in a blackout, and she told me that she wishes I would just die already because she was tired of waiting for that phone call every night from the morgue. She was tired of waiting for the inevitable to happen, and I had destroyed everything that I ever touched in life, and she was so tired of the pain that it caused her that she wished it would just end. And that's hard to hear from your own mother. And I already hated myself enough, and I was thinking about suicide, and when she said that, it was all I needed to hear. I had a rifle in the spare bedroom, and I said a prayer. I said, God, please forgive me for what I'm about to do. I chambered around, and I bit on that barrel and pulled the trigger. The shot went off. It went through a tooth, into my cheek, through my cheek, and out the side of my face. I missed. I was in a blackout, and I blacked out at that point. I remember the shot going off. I remember the bang. I remember my ears ringing. And I remember, it was just a lot of force. I fell over, and when I came to, I was in the driveway, and I had a couple sheriff's deputies pointing their weapons at me, telling me to, lay down and stretch my arms out. And they handcuffed me. And when they found out what had happened, that I wasn't a perpetrator, I was actually a victim. Well, I was both, I guess. I was the shooter and the shootee. But when they found out what was going on, when I came to again, I was in a hospital gurney and I guess an ambulance or a helicopter. I got to ride in a helicopter. I always wanted to do that growing up, wanted to be in the Army. So I got to ride in a helicopter from Bethesda North to UC Trauma Unit. I don't remember any of it. I got the bill, though. It was really, really expensive. And so I came to a couple days later. I had third-degree burns on my tongue, my cheeks, my gums. I was missing a tooth. When it hit that tooth, it exploded the tooth and sent pieces of tooth through my cheek. They were embedded in my cheek, and they had to remove all that stuff. There's a gland that produces saliva on this side of my mouth, which is no longer there, and I have this hole and plastic surgery and all the stuff to repair it and, you know, fix it. And my face is real swollen. And I remember swearing to my mother that came to visit me that I was done forever, and I meant it. You know, I had absolutely hit a bottom. And she, you know, I remember the look of just terror in her eyes. She was scared to death of me because of the animal I had become. This stuff made me an absolute animal. And I told her I was never going to do it again, and I meant it. And as I left that hospital, I got to talk to a psychiatrist. He told me about treatment. He told me about a place called the Cat House on Edward Charles. It's a detox and a short-term residential treatment center. I had no idea about any kind of solution to my problems before that day. And he also told me that, you know, I was a chemically dependent person. He said, your problem is you. You know, that's your problem. Alcoholism, heroin addiction, opioid addiction. He said, that's your problem. So that's the first time I ever really understood or heard what the problem was. I had a tendency to blame others for my problems. And when I knew that information, I said, thank you. That's valuable to me, but I'm never going to touch this stuff again. As I walked out of the hospital, they gave me 3 prescriptions, a mouthwash, an antibiotic, and 90 Percocet 10s. And it started again. And I was homeless in Cincinnati. My mom's got a bullet hole in the ceiling of her house, and she wouldn't let me in. There was a big blood stain on the carpet. So I was homeless in Cincinnati, and I stayed in the abandoned buildings and apartment buildings that I knew, that I felt safe in the basement, you know, under stairwells, in the park if it was warm. I called it urban camping. I'm a bit of a camping guy, so that was my urban camping. I did well, but it was just miserable. And I remember that doctor talking to me about the Cat House, and I gave him a call, and they said, come on down, bring a piece of mail from wherever you're staying that shows you live in Hamilton County, because there's no other detoxes anywhere else. You got to be from the county because it's a Hamilton County treatment facility, and that's amazing that there's no other detoxes available like that. But I brought my piece of mail and $20, and I showed up for the first time at detox. And I stayed only a couple hours. I wasn't really ready. I just didn't want to be homeless at that point. I didn't want to use, but I wasn't ready to let go. They call that the jumping off point. I can't live with it, and I can't live without it. I didn't know what to do. I tried it. 3 hours I lasted at detox, and I left. You know, like I heard just a little bit ago, the treatment available for people that want it, and I had to want it, and I wasn't quite there. But they didn't shut the door and say, well, that was your one shot. Thank you. Well, you know, good luck with your life. They allowed me to try again and again and again. And I went back 5 more times in the course of a couple years. Finally, after watching a bunch of my friends overdose, one right here in Anderson Township, his name's Jason Daugherty. And that was in February of 2008, when he got some heroin outside the Hooters on Beachmont. I was with him, and he used it. And it killed him. And multiple attempts of CPR to resuscitate him. He never took another breath. And when the ambulance got there, I had done CPR for 5, 6, 7 minutes, however long it was. And he was pronounced dead. And I watched my friend leave on a stretcher in a bag. And that was the end for me. 3 other people had died before that, and I did CPR on a couple other people and ended up saving their lives, but people started to die. And what happened is the fentanyl was introduced to Cincinnati in 2006, 2007. And I never witnessed that before. You know, the fentanyl was really bad, and it is today even worse. But after seeing my friend die like that, and not being able to save his life, I remember pounding on his chest and asking God to help me save his life. And it was just, God, please help me. Please help me. And that's all I said over and over as I was pounding on this guy's chest, waiting on the paramedics. And this was before Narcan was available like it is today. And thank God for that and the amount of people that have probably been saved because of Narcan. But he died, and the next day I got a phone call from a counselor at Cat House who who knew me from my previous trips there, and he called me. He also knew Jason because Jason had also been a frequent visitor of Cat House, and he said, Joe, I heard about Jason, and if you don't do something about yourself, you're going to die just like him. And that was the truth. And this guy's name is Frank, a counselor at Cat. He's no longer there, but Frank saved my life that day. I hung up on him. I said no. I wasn't ready. And he found the guy that I lived with in Cleves that was in detox at Cat House at that moment, and saw him and said, you know Joe, come here. And he got him on the phone, and they called me together from his office. And my friend Josh, the first guy I ever did oxys with, first guy I ever did heroin with, one of my best friends was down there, and he was sober, and I could hear it in his voice. And he said, Joe, come down here and do this with me. And that's what it took. You know, God sent an angel, I believe, you know. And that the spiritual experience started happening for me. Everything was kind of set up right on time. And when Josh called me and said, come on down, we'll do this together, that's all it took. I showed up. Thank God that Cat House didn't say, hey, 6 times is one too many, you can't be here. They said, no, come on. Bring a piece of mail and $20. And I went to Cat House, and I got involved. This treatment recovery, it's not for people that need it. It's not for people that want it. It's for people that do the work. And that's what I was taught. And that's something that missed me the times before. I needed treatment. I've needed treatment since I was 12. I wanted treatment for those last few years. Nobody wants to live in an abandoned building and steal from their mother and shoot themselves in the face and watch people die. I wanted treatment, but I wasn't willing to do the work. I had to get off my ass and do something for myself, and I did that. That was March 11, 2008. 8 years, 3 months, and some days sober today. God is good. What happened at Cat House is they let me... Thank you. I didn't do a whole lot. I just followed directions for once in my life. And when they said do something, I said, okay. Yeah, I was beaten to a state of reasonableness by heroin. And I was ready to do something different. And Cat House made a phone call and made a referral for me to go to long-term residential, a place called Prospect House in Price Hill, Cincinnati. Prospect House has been there for 45 years. Long-term residential treatment. The guys are staying 6 months to a year. They got a 73% success rate. If a guy stays a year, that's the highest in the country. It's an abstinence-based program. They don't give you pills to help you. They give you a mop, and they say, get busy. They give you a big book from AA and a pencil and paper, and they say, get busy. They introduce you to a counselor that helps you process and talk through all the stuff that you continue to use as an excuse, and they get you busy. If you guys want to come see what Prospect House is about, on Saturday, the 25th, at Sharon Woods Lakeside Lodge, they're going to have their annual picnic. It's their 29th annual picnic. Last year, there was 2,800 people there in the recovering community from Cincinnati, Ohio. And it's all free, and they eat real, real good. I love that thing. The guys are at Prospect House right now. It's hectic up there. A Pepsi truck showed up today, and they did a bucket chain of 65 guys with cases of pop, and it lasted a couple hours. I mean, just a whole semi full of pop, and it's all free to everybody. Just don't bring, Uncle Willie that's had a couple too many to drink. Make sure they're sober because it is a recovery event. But Prospect House introduced me to a solution that helps me stay sober a day at a time for the rest of my life. They didn't just give me 30 days and said, good luck with your life. I stayed there 3 years and 11 months. It had a continuous aftercare, alumni housing. They really set me up for success. I still have continuing care. I'm not a client anymore. In fact, I'm now a counselor there. I've been a counselor there. Actually, I've worked there for 6 years, and I've been a counselor there for the past 2. And I still show up and talk to my boss every day. He calls it clinical supervision. I call it counseling for free because I just dump all my stuff on him. But I'm in a 12-step fellowship. I don't talk about that a whole lot because it's an anonymous program and it's attraction rather than promotion. And I can't promote it, but you know what it is. And that's also helped me. The thing that's going to help stop this epidemic is, the combined partnership of law enforcement, the treatment, the prevention teams, the supply and demand. You eliminate the supply, you also have to eliminate the demand. People need access to treatment. You shouldn't have to call a phone number at a treatment center and get the runaround and have them tell you it's going to be a 3-week wait list. When a person needs treatment, wants treatment, and is willing to do the work necessary for treatment, there should be a bed available for them. And it's not like that in Cincinnati. People die every day on waiting lists right here in Hamilton County. I see it. One year I went to 14 funerals of good friends of mine. 14 good friends. And they died waiting on waiting lists. We need dollars. You want to get involved, get a pen and a piece of paper and write your congressman. Write these politicians and say, we need funding. We need treatment dollars. We don't need to find another magic pill, because the magic pill is trading one addiction for another addiction. We need beds for long-term residential programming for people. That's what we need. That's what I needed. And I can't speak for every heroin addict, but everybody that I know that I'm in recovery with, they do the same thing as me, and they're all living pretty good lives today. I've been back into my kids' lives. When I was first getting sober, I was diagnosed with hepatitis C as a result of shooting heroin after somebody that had it. My liver was shutting down, and they said I was probably going to die. My insurance company bucked and fought. Thank God for having a job and being employable again and getting some good insurance. They denied me a couple times for the treatment. And after a few appeals, my nurse said, we can get this medicine if you can prove to them that you have a history of depression or suicidal ideations. And I'm like, okie dokie. So I sent her the documents from UC that said self-inflicted gunshot wound to the face, and I was approved for this med, $180,000 worth of pills in 3 days. And I'm now hepatitis C free. I have been for 4 years because of that suicide attempt. So it's not all, bad. All these things are actually, I talk about that suicide attempt, and I'm not like, oh no, poor me. It's this was the introduction to the solution. This was the introduction to what my problem was, and this eventually saved my life, a couple years down the line by getting me hepatitis C free. I'm a father today. I got an amazing relationship with this 10-year-old. She's 11-year-old girl now. She's a joy. I'm sorry. She's a joy to be around. She loves her dad. It's been a hard road. I've just now been back in her life for a year. Her mom was really reluctant to let her come back around me, but her mom just got a DUI, and now I'm the man. You know what I mean? And I got custody, and I get to teach this kid about living and morals and values, and I get to be an example of a sober person in her life today, and that's amazing. In fact, I had her with me the other day. I just went Friday and I bought a car. I've been buying cars lately. It's amazing. When you don't buy dope, you can buy vehicles. So I bought this Honda, and I bought it from a guy that lives in Indiana, and I pulled up to the UDF at the corner of Auburn and Martin Luther King, right there in Avondale. A guy saw my license plates, Indiana license plates, and he said, I see those plates. Are you good? He wanted to sell me heroin. I've been driving down the street before, and they throw a thing called a tester in my window. It's a packet of heroin with a phone number attached to a little piece of paper in the baggie. It's called a tester, and they give those out daily to people to get them hooked. And I've been, 8 years sober, driving to an AA meeting or something with my daughter and get one of these things thrown in the window of my car. So it's terrible. Thank you guys for listening. I'm sorry I took up so much of your time, but recovery is possible. Keep fighting the fight. Keep doing what you guys are doing. Keep showing up to these and get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It's an amazing journey. Thank you for sharing it with us tonight. And part of the journey that he went through, and just a recommendation, if you're not following Hamilton County Sheriff's Office or Newtown Police or Anderson Township's Facebook page, follow it. Because if you have prescription drugs in your cabinets, they always post actively when there is a weekend, a day that they have set aside where it's prescription drug turn-in. Go and get them out of your cabinets, because if you're not using them, someone else might. And so, Joe, thank you so much for sharing. All right, I'd like to bring up Commissioner Dennis Dieters. Currently serves as the Vice President of the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Dieters was appointed to the board in January of 2016 after serving 6 years as trustee in Colerain Township. Dennis currently serves as the chair of the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition. He'll give us some insight now into how the coalition is bringing other partners to the table to help law enforcement fight this battle. Please welcome Commissioner Dennis Dieters.
Thank you. I'm Commissioner Dennis Dieters. It's my honor to be here today, and I would like to extend my thank you to the Anderson Township trustees, Trustee Girth, Stone, and Andrew Pappas, who I think are leading the fight here. You've got good leadership in Anderson Township. You should be proud of their leadership on this issue. Also like to thank Sheriff Neal, who's carried the torch for the county, along with the Heroin Coalition. Sheriff, your statements at the outset are right. Talk is cheap on this issue. The leaders in our community, the politicians, those that are elected to lead in this issue, there's no alternative. We need to find solutions to the heroin epidemic. And I like to frame this, we talk about epidemics, and it's well placed because it's a disease, and we've all heard from doctors who talk about how this drug changes your brain chemistry. But it's also an emergency. And with that paradigm, and we think about how we deal with an emergency as a community, the first thought is everybody puts down what they're doing, and we get together and figure out solutions. So I think it's great that we have a great crowd tonight. From the bottom of my heart, I think that the solutions start with you all, and making sure we all know where we are with this problem and how we're going to solve it. I did start as a township trustee, and I came at this issue in a way that a lot of you probably did, wondering, why we'd be in the business of charity. Why do we care about these people? These are drug addicts. They're less than human. All the natural inclinations we have to consider opiate addicts. From a local government standpoint, as a township trustee, like your trustees here, we started looking at the bottom line, how resource was affected, listening to our EMS, fire officers coming back saying, we're spending more time on this stuff than we are regular run-of-the-mill runs. So from a taxpayer responsibility, you should care about this, regardless of whether or not you're interested in helping people who are addicted. This is a serious problem that we need to get ahead of. When I became commissioner in January, I was fortunate enough to follow in the footsteps of Commissioner Hartman, who put together the Heroin Coalition, which is, for a government, pretty unique, because what it did is it asked everybody involved to break down some walls and get to the table and say, okay, my job is related to your job. Law enforcement has a connection to treatment. We're all in the same game here. So the coalition embodies what I think smart government is, and frankly, how we attack this problem on a local, regional level. I'm also an attorney, and I can tell you from personal experience, I've dealt with families who have zero experience with drugs, no history of alcoholism, who have children who have died, who are in prison today because of this problem. So I think we can all say safely that it's time we look at hard solutions and figure out how we're going to solve it. I'm flying solo for the first time on my PowerPoint, so bear with me if I mess it up. Some statistics, I think some of you have seen this in the news. We've got 10,000 heroin addicts coming through the jail in 2014 alone. There's probably going to be more this year. I'm sure the sheriff will attest to that. 200 heroin-related deaths in 2015. 400 911 calls to county communication center. That's just county. We've got a city communication center and Norwood Center too, so I'm sure it's more. 770 people visited Hamilton County hospitals in 2014. 200 heroin-related deaths in Hamilton County in 2015. That doesn't count the fentanyl-related deaths, which is significantly more. This is shocking to me, but more overdose deaths last year than motor vehicle accidents in the state. And this one is worse. 70% of the babies, kids under 1, that are in foster care in our county system are there because of heroin addiction. They may be addicted themselves, but the reason that they're in foster care is because of heroin or opiate addiction. And that's heartbreaking. Okay, I talked about the coalition. This is a group of interested leaders who felt compelled to come together and look towards solutions. You'll hear from Chief Sinan in a minute about the law enforcement side. We've also got Chief Ober, who's here tonight, who's on the coalition, as well as our health commissioner. I chair the commission, and we've got a number of prevention providers that are involved as well. So we've begun to meet monthly and talk about how we're going to come together as a community and sort through finding real solutions and getting real results. The four pillars of the coalition, and I think we touched on those. Joe mentioned, how important they all are. Prevention. We need to get to our kids and talk to them about how we're going to deal with the challenges. I've got little kids at home. Not a day goes by where I don't think about sending them into the world with what we're facing with the heroin addiction. Harm reduction. This is preventing disease. Obviously, the hepatitis C epidemic, that's a corollary to the heroin addiction. That's important that we focus on that. We've also got exposing our first responders to needles. You talk to people who are in civic associations who do litter patrols. Talk to them about what they're finding on the side of the street. It's a real risk, and harm reduction is an important component. Supply control, this is what our law enforcement's on top of. Again, Chief Sinan will tell you a little bit about, a lot about where we are going with that and some of the innovations that we've come up with to try to stop the supply. And treatment, there's the demand. And the focus there obviously is getting people who are addicted to opiates in a position where they can get back into society, and it is a process. We'll talk about that in a second. The coalition, along with the other regional coalitions, has put together a website, injecthope.com. If you have any questions about what your government and your communities are doing to combat opiate addiction and the heroin problem, write this website down, refer your friends to it. It'll give you direction. It's a regional website, give you direction on what we're doing with respect to treatment, how you notify the police, the law enforcement on dealers, how you recognize addiction in your children. These types of things can be addressed in this one-stop shop website, and I think it's important that we all collaborate on a focal point, and that's an important resource. Obviously, we've got the tip line 352-DOPE. That's referenced in the website as well. We're distributing Narcan through the coalition to save lives. We've made it accessible to every police agency in the county. 4,300 kits distributed to police and fire agencies. I think initially when this Narcan was rolled out on the street, there was some resistance, let these people die. The experience has brought us to the realization that some of them don't die. Some of them are veterans, people who put their life on the line. We've got first responders going into a situation where they can save a life and possibly turn a life around, frankly save a family. So the use of Narcan has become prevalent. That's a bad thing because we're needing to use it more and more, but it's a good thing because we're giving people an opportunity to turn their life around. I can't say enough about what our law enforcement's doing. Sheriff Neal and our coalition team. We've got 10 heroin investigators that are housed at the county that are on loan from different jurisdictions. They're looking at this epidemic, this emergency in a different way, and they're in a position where they're starting to control the supply, and they're trying to get in front of it. We're also utilizing the Greater Cincinnati Fusion Center, which is in part and parcel to the Sheriff's Office, which collects data, tracks the overdoses, and gives us incredibly helpful data that we're using from a nationwide network that's giving us the ability to find out where it's coming from and how we can stop it. Chief Sinan will probably talk to you about the Not in My Neighborhood initiative. These are cards that are handed out at overdoses and in other situations where people are concerned about awareness with respect to heroin. these are to encourage individuals revived with Narcan to contact the crisis line and get help. That's an important component to what we're doing, because traditionally an emergency response team would respond to an overdose, to either take them to the hospital or release them, and we leave it go. So we've got a situation where, from a law enforcement standpoint, they may be back in the system. They may be trying to break into a house, trying to commit a crime, driving down the street high, putting us at risk. If we don't take the steps to put a person that's overdosed or an addicted person in connection with treatment options, we've failed. And that's what we're seeing happen with respect to these Not in My Neighborhood initiative and the cards that are being left. In Corrigan Township, when addressing the opiate addiction, recognizing that there was a bit of a disconnect between what law enforcement and emergency response was doing, we decided to create a special response team that would follow up with an addicted person, that would not only have a police officer that was able to continue the investigation of the overdose, but an EMS person, as well as a treatment counselor, to get that person connected with treatment. So we didn't continue the cycle. Traditional roles, government, law enforcement, treatment, traditionally we didn't have a connection there. Now we do, and there's initiatives that are coming out of the Heroin Coalition and our local leaders that are going to eventually beat this. So treatment, $1 million from the county. That's probably a drop in the bucket for what we need to do, but it's a start. It's the first time we've dedicated funds as a county to a specific health and criminal issue as it relates to the heroin epidemic. We're connecting users with detox, treatment, and recovery. It's the final step, and as Joe mentioned, it's a process. We're having to look at our systems. Our traditional court and drug treatment systems were designed for sobriety-based treatment. And we don't have the capacity at this point to do the necessary treatment that's going to last with respect to a heroin user. The Cat House has just received funding to expand. That's a good thing, but the waiting lists are still there. And as a community, if we're going to beat this with respect to the healthcare component, the criminal component, the mental health component, we need to start to look at our systems and figure out a way to better utilize our funds and our resources to make sure that we're using treatments that are effective. And they're there. I mean, we've got a living example here. People can survive this if they have the right tools, so we need to start talking about that. We do have great systems in place: drug court, veterans court, mental health court, and change court. Most of these courts, have different names, but they're all dealing with opiates. I go to the graduations. It's opiate addiction. The opiate addiction for veterans or overdose rate is double what it is for the general population. So we've got a major problem, and these courts are rethinking the way that they deal with this, because it's not just a court of law where we're talking about criminals. We're talking about people who have a sickness. Next steps. We talked a little bit about how important it is. I think Craig talked about drug drop boxes in county facilities, anywhere we can put them. I mean, the statistics are there. It starts with prescription drugs. Access to prescription drugs is dangerous. It can lead us on the path that we've seen. So we need to get more drop boxes so that people who are law-abiding and recognize the dangers through prevention efforts can dispose of their drugs. We need to continue to focus on funding opportunities, stop thinking about traditional efforts to try to beat this, and look towards innovative, creative funding efforts. Local partnerships have just begun. There's a number of community leaders that are coming together, but we need more. We can't stop with where we are today. We'll continue to build on those. The public awareness campaign is important. But we need to look at alternatives, because if we're in government and we're leading with an epidemic and an emergency like we have today, we've got no choice other than to find creative solutions. and we're going to get there, and I hope that you continue the fight with us. Thank you.
No, these are. All right, thank you, Commissioner Dieters. All right, next up, I'd like to bring up the Village of Newtown Police Chief Tom Synan and the Hamilton County Sheriff Sergeant Mike Steers. Village of Newtown Police Chief Tom Synan also serves as Director of the Hamilton County Heroin Task Force. Sheriff Sergeant Mike Steers supervises this group as well, which is actually tasked with tracking down the dealers who prey on the addicts and sell them the heroin, resulting in the overdose deaths in our community. Please welcome them both. Does that work? Does this work now? Nope.
Yeah, just come up here.
I'm vertically challenged, so I wanted to get away from the podium. Because, see, and then I go here. So I want to talk a little bit about this epidemic as a whole. I describe it kind of like an onion. Kind of burns your nose, your eyes water, and you think, man, I got an answer, and you peel off that next layer, and you think, I finally figured it out. And then your eyes water, your nose burn, and you keep peeling and peeling and peeling, and it doesn't seem like there's answers. The numbers that the commissioner talked about are kind of shocking. That 414 are overdoses just in Hamilton County. That is more than auto accidents and homicides combined. Think about this, 10,000 people were processed through the Hamilton County Justice Center, 10,000 on heroin-related incidents. Mike will get into this a little bit more, but that fentanyl number, the 238, that's fentanyl related, and basically the way we kind of devised these numbers was if that drug is in their system at their time of death, then we're kind of including that could have been a possible part of their death. In 2013, there were only 8 fentanyl-related overdose deaths. So 2015, 238. So it shows you how widespread it's become. And the thing about fentanyl, and Mike will probably touch on this a little bit more, in a hospital setting, when doctors talk about it, it is a very good drug. It is very easy to use, very easy to bring people back. But the issue is that these dealers are not pharmacists, they're not scientists, they're not doctors. We have no clue what they're actually putting in that fentanyl, or if it even is fentanyl, and they're mixing it with heroin. Part of what we've been trying to do from the law enforcement side and from the coalition side is humanize this issue. And for me, that's probably one of the most important issues on this is humanizing these people. Because whenever I talk about numbers, it kind of bothers me. Because these aren't just numbers, these are people. When we pushed out Narcan to all these police agencies, and part of this complexity and what surprises me is some of the pushback we get. And the commissioner kind of brought this up was, when we pushed out Narcan, I thought this was like the easiest solution in the world. Let's give somebody something that saves their life, there'll be no pushback on it. But when we give talks, I hear people say, why don't you just let them die? And I'm astonished by this, to be honest with you. Because in no other part of my job do people tell me to let people die. I've dealt with people who drink and drive, and not once has society told us to let them die. Been on multiple suicide attempt runs, and at no time did society tell us just to let them go. As a matter of fact, they said, risk your life to save theirs. And what I tell people is that you would not say that if you were standing over the person that overdosed. Because standing over them, you're standing next to the mother, the father, the brother, sister, son, and daughter. And you are part of that grief. So one of the things we've been really working on is how do we humanize this? How do we make this stigma? How do we change it? And for law enforcement to stand out in front and say, these are people, that is just a start. These cards that he talked about, what the cards basically say is we revived you and we want you to be addiction free. And we have the website injecthope.com. We have the phone number for Center for Addictive Services. Some of the other things we're doing from the coalition and law enforcement side, he touched on a little bit, was the Fusion Center. The Fusion Center was developed after 9/11. And it's basically a place where citizens could report suspicious activity to law enforcement. Law enforcement could report that to the Fusion Center, and they had this huge database. That information went out nationally and came back down to the local level. Well, we thought if we can do that from the terrorism side, why can't we use it for heroin? So what we've been doing now is taking the information from overdose reports and logging that into the Fusion Center. It then goes nationally, but then it comes back down to every officer has access in Hamilton County. We now put out a report, and the report is not pleasing. Every week we get the report, about 20 to 25 people reported on average that overdose in Hamilton County, and every week on average about 1 to 2 people die. That reporting, what we're hoping with that is that we'll be able to identify hotspots and better utilize resources to say that, number one, either fentanyl's on the street so we can warn paramedics, EMS, that is out on the street, and they can have better services to render first aid, but also better police services. If we know that the fentanyl, the dealers are in that area, maybe we can hit that spot. One of the legislations that just passed recently that we worked on locally was allowing fire and EMS to share their runs, Narcan runs. There were some concerns with HIPAA. Part of that, what we wanted to do is we know sometimes there's multiple people being Narcan. And I always hear the argument that, well, we're enabling people. And I'm not going to be naive and say there's not a handful of people that are like that, but I disagree that the majority of the people want to overdose and die, or that they're just hoping that you bring them Narcan. So with the fire department and getting that information, which we'll be able to do here soon, it'll allow us to map that, and we'll be able to identify those people who have been Narcan multiple times. The hope is with these QRT teams, like the commissioner talked about, as those roll out more, we'll be able to identify these people and hopefully intervene with treatment. What we've done in the past year with the coalition and the task force has been outstanding. It's been amazing. It doesn't seem like overall, because we talk about these numbers and they seem scary, like there's a whole lot that's been done, but actually there has been. And Mike will get into the arrest and what they've done on the task force side, but we're actually saving lives. The police officers now have Narcan. We're not getting this information, we're not getting this data, but I got to tell you, we're still missing a key part of this fight. And that key part is you. You as a community, when you get fed up enough, when you say enough is enough, and you're able to join together, it is your voice that will change this. We can stand up here as law enforcement, we can stand up here as elected officials, but ultimately it's all of you. Because there's still things I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about penalties, and I get pushed back with this also, and I understand this too. I think that those who are selling the heroin, those who are selling fentanyl, most of them, the majority, aren't necessarily the users. I'm not going to say they're not all that, but I think judges should have more discretion. I think we should be tougher on those people. But I also think that we as a society have to make a decision. Is heroin and fentanyl such a dangerous drug that maybe we should treat it that way? When you have 414 people die of overdoses, when 238 die of fentanyl, to me, it is bad enough that we do something about it. The other thing that we need to work on, and they touched on it a little bit, is I'm astonished that we can Narcan somebody, and as long as they can answer the general questions from fire EMS, because they've got laws and things that they got to follow, that we can walk away from them. They're not going to go to jail. We're not going to necessarily get them in treatment. And those are things that I think need to change. But I, as a small town chief, them as a task force, those as local county officials, there's only so much that we can do, and it's going to take all of you. And the way that you need to do it is go to the injecthope.com site, look at the resources, get with Prevention First, get with Interact for Health. And I encourage you all to start community groups. But here's what I want out of this also, what I'd like to see. And I wrote an op-ed on WCPO.com. And one of the things I talked about was when drinking and driving became such a problem that society decided enough was enough, we developed MAD. I'm not saying MAD's the answer, because I did get some really good feedback from it, and people can really relate to alcohol. Just about everyone's had a drink before, but not everyone's done heroin before or done opiates. So part of that stigma is that we need to change that. And if we can have organizations like a MAD, this is what I tell people. When enough mothers get mad, things change. And when we have that, laws will start changing. Funding will start coming down. And that's what we're in desperate need of. We can sit there and put all this effort in, and trust me, the dedication, especially from the task force, the officers, the commissioners, the administration, the people that are working on this is tremendous. It is almost 24/7. But we can only do so much. It is when all of you get together, you have the voice. When you unite for a single cause and you say, we as a community have had enough, money will start pouring in, laws will start changing, and I promise you, when you get involved, we will fight, we'll be able to end this epidemic, but it's going to take you. Thank you.
I'm just going to briefly touch on what the Heroin Task Force is and who it's made up of and what our mission is. The Heroin Task Force consists of myself, 2 detectives from the Sheriff's Office, 2 investigators from the City of Cincinnati, Norwood Lieutenant, Special Agent from BCI, and an Ohio State Highway Patrolman. All of this group got together, and our mission is to investigate heroin and opiate overdose fatalities and select non-fatal overdoses. That list of people that I just gave, it sounds like a decent number of investigators, but the sad truth about this problem is that's not nearly enough people to investigate the overdose deaths that are happening in Hamilton County. We're doing the best work that we possibly can, but the sheer number of people that are overdosing and dying from opiates is astonishing. And I'm trying to get into the habit of changing the verbiage that I use, moving away from saying heroin and talking about opiates, because the real killer that we're seeing is fentanyl. It's becoming more and more rare to see someone have a fatal overdose from heroin. Most of our fatal overdoses are fentanyl-related or pure fentanyl that we're seeing. We've recently made several seizures where the test results come back that there is no heroin in this whatsoever. It's fentanyl, some type of cutting agent, but there's no heroin. It's pure fentanyl. There's different people that will come up and give you different potency levels for how strong fentanyl is. Well, the truth is we don't know how potent it is. We know that it's more potent than heroin. We know that it's more deadly. But this is not medical-grade fentanyl. This is not something that's been stolen from a hospital or taken out of somebody's medicine cabinet. This fentanyl is being manufactured in clandestine labs and being shipped into this country. And so there's no oversight, there's no regulation, there's no way to know the purity of what you're getting. And the reason that I'm stressing that so much is because there is no safe amount of this to use. Even someone who is a gram-a-day heroin user, someone who has been using heroin for a long time, they know exactly how much heroin they can use. They know that 2 times a day they have to have a half a gram of heroin. And that person is always very careful. But on a particular day, they go out and they buy what they think is heroin, and they end up getting something that's maybe 20% heroin and 80% fentanyl, or some other mixture. And they inject that half of a gram that for the last year or so has kept them going in the morning, and they're dead before they finish pushing the plunger. There's also been cases where we've interviewed people after there's been a fatality, and I'm speaking with a friend or a family member, and they make a comment to me, I can't believe that they're dead. They just snort it. They don't shoot it, as if snorting it is somehow safe. Again, if you're purchasing fentanyl, whether intentionally or unintentionally, whether you know you're getting it or not, if the product that you end up purchasing is fentanyl, it is very likely going to end up in a fatal, or it's very likely going to end up in an overdose. And unfortunately, all too oftentimes, it's a fatal overdose. So that is my message for today. Thank you.
All right, one last speaker, and then we're actually going to have a Q&A session, so hopefully you've been jotting down some notes, questions you want answered up here. I'd like to bring up Harrison Police Chief Chuck Lindsay. Harrison Police Chief Chuck Lindsay is with the Not in My Neighborhood campaign. You can see some of the posters over there. Another effort, of course, in giving resources to you, the citizen. Sir.
Good evening. The Hamilton County Association of Chiefs of Police is a major driver of the Heroin Coalition. And with the task force, we needed a way in which we could publicize to that group of people who knows best who's dealing drugs in our community, how to help us by anonymously
turning those people in. And on the lower right-hand side of the stage, you'll see some "not in my neighborhood" signs. 2 phone numbers there where you can anonymously report any drug dealers that you're aware of or that are operating in your neighborhoods. It's not just not in my neighborhood, it's not in your neighborhood, but the goal is not in any neighborhood. And what I stand up here and ask you to do, and many of you have knowledge or rumors or beliefs who may or may not be using drugs. The anonymous part is true. You won't get a phone call back. We're not going to publish your name or even ask it. But what we want to do, and those 2 phone numbers go directly to our task force and directly to Renew. And those investigators, a lot of times that 1 phone call is that last piece of a puzzle that we need to finish an investigation or start one, and it will save a person's life, if not more than that. Unlike any other issue that law enforcement has faced, we cannot arrest ourselves out of this. There is no police effort, no department, no federal, state, local law enforcement agency that is going to stop this. If there's one theme tonight that we want all of you to understand, is that to win this takes all of us working together. Elected officials, law enforcement, fire, doctors, nurses, counselors, lawyers, moms and dads, housewives and children. Because even if we could stop the supply today, the addicts that are there now are still going to be there. And if we don't get them treatment and we stop one drug of abuse, they'll find another one. Treatment, supply reduction, law enforcement, education, prevention, all of those things take everyone in this room to make that a reality. And until that happens, we will be here year after year giving the same talk, asking for the same help that we're asking tonight. Please help us make it a reality that it's not in any neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so we'd like to actually invite anybody who spoke earlier. Gentlemen, if you'd like to come out. Number of mics sitting there at the table, or if you prefer the handheld microphone again. What's that? You couldn't get it working? All right. So with that in mind, does anyone in the audience have any questions? Questions, concerns, something that you would like to see done? Yes, ma'am.
It's my same old question. How does Cincinnati Police Department participate in this? To my knowledge, drug, heroin calls, reports to them about behavior and deals still are the lowest level 7 on the priority system that they've set up. That those calls don't even have to be put out to police officers. They can just be filtered through electronically device 24 hours later. It's considered the lowest level. It's not a priority for us in the city. How can we change that?
Are you asking how they're participating in the current coalition or how they can participate better in the future?
How can we as a community get them to make that a
Answer
priority?
details.
Is that not the goal of the commission, to make heroin awareness and these pieces of the puzzle are just being tossed in the wind?
Well, I know that every bit of intelligence that we gather is shared amongst Cincinnati police officers as well as all the other participating agencies. Lieutenant Winall has Cincinnati officers working with him, and I have Cincinnati officers working with me as well. Neither of us have officers that are answering calls on the street, though. Both of us are in investigative capacities. So I'm really not in a position to answer the patrol side of the Cincinnati Police Division.
Let's do the 911.
Right. And that's something that I'm not in a position to answer how they handle their 911 calls. Sorry.
I'll take the question to them, though. I'll ask them for you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
No. And honestly, I'll tell you, and you know, there's some law enforcement and court officials in the room, and Judge Berkowitz in the back. They'll tell you that the court system agrees with you. There's a number of programs that are available to first-time offenders, even multiple offenders, that will give them the opportunity to go through treatment. I think the problem that we're seeing is a resource problem where we're beginning to learn that the treatment needs to be modeled differently. So I think that if you look at the Hamilton County courts themselves, they're leading the charge with respect to specialty courts that address opiate addiction for different types of people, but ultimately you get a chance. And it's very rare, I think, you'll see a police officer on an overdose or a use issue where there's no significant dealing, and the law enforcement officials can talk to this, I'm sure, that are interested in charging. They're probably interested in getting someone help, unless there's a significant connection to some drug cartel or otherwise. I think you'll see the government and the law enforcement and the court system's interested in getting someone out of addiction.
As law enforcement, I'm going to reiterate what he said, and I think we have the wrong people in jail. And I think that jail, in a way, it would be a good step if we were able to have assessments and get them into treatment, get them towards those drug courts, but that takes funding. And I think a lot of the issues that we're coming up with is, it's like anything else. The cartels and the drug people are really good at making money, and we don't have the money to keep up with them. And in order for us to really make a difference, we need that money. And again, I think that we need to reevaluate who's in jail, who we're putting in jail, how we treat those people in jail. If it is someone that needs treatment, we should be pushing them towards a medically assisted treatment, towards counseling, and get them, ultimately from a law enforcement standpoint, if we can reduce the demand, we can reduce the supply. If we reduce the demand, we reduce the burglaries, the thefts, the auto thefts, the shootings, the robberies, all those things. That's ultimately what we need to do, but we need the money to do it, and that's where the challenge lies, is the money.
What happens in jail, because we have an audience there, half the population in the jail are addicts, and the reason they're in the jail is not so much because they are an addict, it was the crimes they committed to support their addiction. The burglaries, the robberies, the grand thefts, to support their addictions. But we do have an audience there, but what does happen in the jail is forced detox. They will detox while they're in the jail. And with the programs that we do have in the jail and with reentry, once detox occurs, we can then point them into direction for treatment upon release. Because detox has occurred, now you need to get took us into treatment. And so we can help out in that regard.
I have a question about this tip line. If I report somebody from Mount Washington or East End, where I pastored for 26 years, where is that going to go, and who is going to respond to that?
The tip line currently for the Regional Narcotics Unit comes to us, and we get hundreds of tips every week. Depending upon the validity of the tip and how actionable it is, we assign an investigator to work on it. Understanding that when you have hundreds of tips coming in and you have a limited number of investigators, of course, a lot of tips come in and say there's 2 cars and this is a license plate and they're in front of my house selling drugs now. Well, we're not equipped to get there because we're not close probably to Mount Washington, and the investigator may not be on, or may be on another assignment. She mentioned the 911 calls earlier, and that's something that we don't handle because it's the Cincinnati Police Department, and I can't comment on their priority. But we get their text tip lines, we get emails. As the chief mentioned earlier about putting together a puzzle, that's what we do, okay? If we get the piece of information, it goes in our intelligence database. And if our highway interdiction cars are out there and run a license plate, it would pop up into the Intel database that that was a car that was supposedly involved in selling drugs in Mount Washington. And assuming we find a traffic violation and stop them, we have canines that we bring up and try to get probable cause to search vehicles in that way. So I encourage text-to-tip messages or any intelligence that we can get. Some of them are not actionable right away, but that does not mean that we do not value the information and try to put it together in a puzzle later on that hopefully will lead to an arrest and conviction.
That's one of the things we need to make clear is how does this process work? Because I think when people call in, they expect an officer to be able to go right there and arrest somebody. We watch TV, and to be honest with you, this drug war, this drug fight is very unfair because we have a lot of rules from the court, and we have this thing called a constitution that we got to follow. The drug cartels have no rules, no binding document whatsoever, so they can do whatever they want. We have to be able to build cases with probable cause. That's very important. And from probable cause, then you have to often make buys, and from those buys, you have to build up a case. So that often takes quite a long time, and to be honest with you, sometimes, and these guys are the experts, and they'll tell you, a lot of times they'll work really hard on a case and it'll fall through because something happens. An informant doesn't tell the truth, or they can't follow up with it. So it's very difficult on that end, but here's the really important thing. Call anyway, because that data is being collected, and what we found is that these heroin dealers know no borders, so we know no borders, and we're keeping track of those people. And although we don't have probable cause right now, maybe a month from now, maybe a couple months from now, that name will pop up, and these guys will recognize it and go, oh, I remember that tip. We're going to watch this guy and be able to build probable cause and be able to arrest him. So please call. Even though it doesn't seem like nothing's being done, trust me, on the back end, there's a lot of work being done trying to build up that probable cause. Yes, ma'am.
Would it be too costly to saturate the neighborhoods with signs like that? Or even have maybe a smaller one that people so choose, you could put in the windows?
Yeah, Chief Lindsay, well, I can tell you right now, he's already thinking about probably making up more signs.
30 signs, please take one if you would like them, and I can get the smaller window versions back here tomorrow by tomorrow.
Sir, you had a question?
I've heard that a lot of sales of drugs go on through the internet. Someone makes an offer that, I mean, not actually mentioning the drug, but somehow there's some keyword and then someone makes a buy and then it's sent to them through the mail or whatever. Have you come across anything like that?
I've been doing this for 28 years, and while the internet is used occasionally for communications, the general communication is cell phone to cell phone, person to person, in order to make somebody make a contact on the street. Using the internet gives out an IP address. An IP address can be followed up on and identified, so they'll get phones from Walmart or anybody else in anybody's name. They'll keep it for 1 or 2 weeks and they'll throw the phone away, send out all the text messages to all their customers saying this is the new number. And they try to stay one step ahead of us by using phones and throwing them away every week or two. An IP address that they had on their own with identification could lead us back to them, and it's not been a commonplace in my experience.
What prevention and outreach is occurring right now to reach the addicts to possibly do a needle exchange program or prevention that's happening in Anderson Township specifically?
Trustee Girth can talk to that. Countywide, I'll briefly say that there's funds, the health department's putting funds out to put needle exchanges in communities. That has a stigma to it. I think people cringe when they hear that. What the county's doing is making sure that the local leaders have complete buy-in before they do it. In Corrigan Township, they're going through this process, and you hit on a great point. The important component is not the exchange, it's the connection that you can get someone who's addicted to treatment. Sure. And that's what's being explored, and again, people think that that's bringing addicts to your community. Statistics show that it's not really the case, but communities that are really getting hit hard are exploring those options because they see the importance. But I don't know if Anderson Township's looking at that or...
We do not currently have any needle exchange, nor are we actively talking about it. But I will say that because of where we are and who we sit between and what's going on the bookends of Anderson Township, your point is a good one, is that, you know, it's not necessarily for people in Anderson as it is the people traveling through Anderson. What I will say is that we do, the township, we have allocated extra money towards a renew officer. We are one of few townships that do this, but we have actually invested over the last, Vicki, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 years, 4 years maybe, where we have actually paid for additional officer dedicated to nothing but this specific cause in Anderson.
So for Piccadilly and the tent city with the heroin and prostitutes, or Anderson Township, Claremont County Township addressing that section particularly, outreach prevention, or?
Yeah, I will tell you, Piccadilly, if you're referring to the apartments down just past Cherry Grove, yeah, so someone has bought those. I don't know if you've been down there lately, but those have been purchased. Every tenant in those 30 buildings that were back there have been moved out, and they are currently under remodel with new ownership. So that specific community is being addressed. That's Pierce Township, but that is specifically being addressed.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any particular congressman or senator that we should write to? Do you know of any?
Your local one, actually all of them are involved from the local level, state level, and federal level. Senator Portman's been very good, especially locally. He's just passed a bill, opened up some money. But any of your local state representatives know about this issue, and go ahead and get a hold of them. Trust me, I bother them constantly, so you'll have no problems at all.
And your bill, it was for the dealers to get more jail time. Do you know where that's sitting right now?
Yeah, it's not moving. Here's the thing, that when I deal with the elected officials, they're very honest about stuff, and they're very good to me. They're like, okay, Chief, you call 100 times. We heard you like 99 times, but here's the deal. There is no room in the jail. They make valid points. There's no room in the jail. There's no money to put people in jail. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying jail is the answer. It is not. When it comes to the user, it is not the answer. We need to do something different. That's part of the, and so welcome to the onion. So now we're peeling the onion. And each time you peel that onion, when we get to the center of this onion, I can tell you what the answer is going to be. We need money. We need money for treatment centers. We need money for jails. We need money for all of this. Money is the answer.
How you're going to use that money.
Exactly.
Getting through the red tape so that the money goes directly to the addicts and to citizens.
And guess who gets that done? You. As I'm telling you, you as communities, when we get prevention first, when they put community groups together, people listen. We have elected officials up here. I'm telling you, when a group of people speak as one, everyone listens. I have called, many of us have called, many of us have spoke to local leaders. And what it comes down to is, what do they want to spend the money on? And what they're going to spend the money on is what you decide they're going to spend the money on. If it is money going directly to medically assisted treatment, then that's what it needs to be. Look, I've been very vocal, so vocal about this that there's a surplus in the state of Ohio. The Cuyahoga County coroner just wrote an article not too long ago urging that they release that money and directly put it into the county so they can put out medically assisted treatment, so they can put more resources on the street. We're saying that, but when it's just a handful of people, it doesn't make a difference. When it's a group of people, it does make a difference. So you have to be vocal towards your local elected officials, but it needs to be a collective group of people speaking. We have these pockets of Interact for Health and Prevention First, and they're doing a great job. But what I'd like to see, again, going back to that Mothers Against Drunk Driver concept, is a whole group as one, speaking as one voice, having a very powerful voice and influence on those who control the purse strings. And then you tell them where that money goes. This coalition now has a foundation, and we're sitting there, and we've got treatment centers, we've got prevention, we've got the Board of Health, we have law enforcement, we have all these people at a table. And you know the one thing we're lacking? Is that money coming in that we can say it goes to the Board of Health, it goes to the task force, it goes to medically assisted treatment. Trust me, many of us up here on the stage are pounding this message, but it doesn't do any good until you speak.
Grassroots efforts are very key.
need you to call with me.
Yeah. I was involved in that grassroots. I was a DARE officer, and I taught DARE here in Anderson Township. And I can tell you, when DARE was big and strong, we never had an epidemic. But too many naysayers says DARE's not working. Well, DARE went away. And since DARE went away, because it was the prevention, it was the education part of this. Now it's gone. We have 2 schools in Sycamore, that's it. And we have an epidemic.
I can tell you, Sheriff's right, but I can tell you that this has become such a moneymaker for the dealers. It's also something that the hospitals and our healthcare systems are paying attention to, and you're seeing treatment centers develop. I know the major hospital systems in our county, in our region, are looking at treatment centers. So it might not be all on the government to bear the load, because there's money to be had in this business. And I think it's a paramount, because it's healthcare, that we engage those healthcare leaders that should be in the business of it. I mean, government shouldn't be in the business of curing disease. Obviously, we are, because it's got this crime component and the crossover. But you're seeing the healthcare providers step into the void there, and I think that that's going to continue. We still need to look at funds. We still need to find ways to get people to pay attention to how much of a drain this is on our resource across the board.
All right, we are starting to come against the wall on time. Sir, back there in the white shirt, you had a question? Yeah.
When we do make the bust on the dealers, what happens with the bust and the product? What happens with the money that becomes from the bust? Why are we using that money for money?
Well, as far as the seizure of the money, there are rules and laws that pertain to how the forfeited money can be spent. And so there are restrictions on how you can disseminate that money that's particularly seized and what it can be used for. I didn't hear your question about the bust, but that's what the drugs and the money are seized and then submitted through a civil forfeiture that may be changing to a criminal forfeiture through the state legislature, which will mean less money seized, probably, based on my experience. And then the laws would have to change to allow for that money to be distributed in a different way than it currently is.
All right, we've actually
one more minute.
hit the wall on time, though. Everyone is staying around for individual one-on-ones for a little while, so if you have any questions, you can continue to ask those questions right here. But again, keep the conversation going. If you have any treatment facilities you're aware of, resources in the community, grassroots efforts, things of that nature, on our website, wcpo.com/heroin, we have a number of resources there, but we can always use more. We only know what's available when somebody gives us that information. There are a number of stories, obviously, that we've done here in the community, a number of the efforts from Newtown and, of course, the Sheriff's Office, and people who have fought the fight and have survived and are success stories. So there are positive stories there as well, I promise. But if you have any of those resources, you'd love to share them with us. You can look me up at McKee WCPO on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, stick around if you have any other questions.
Guys, I just want to finish. There's 2 people I want to thank. Craig McKee for emceeing tonight, so appreciate you doing that. And guys, everybody up here is fighting this from a professional level, but there's one individual who's here just giving up his hot time, and I want you guys to thank Joe Lucas for sharing his story. That's not easy to share such a powerful story that's very personal, and we really appreciate him coming out. But otherwise, again, stick around, and these folks will be happy to talk to you. So, thank you.